Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today, you and I are going to be joined by Joshua Tongol. Welcome, Joshua. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Are you ready to fear not today?
Yeah, I'm ready. Let's do this.
Joshua is an author, speaker, YouTuber, and host of the Flip Side podcast. With his unique and diverse background, he's become a fresh voice for modern-day spirituality. As a rising thought leader, Josh's simple yet profound teachings have helped countless people throughout the world recover from legalism. He speaks on topics such as religion, spirituality, and personal development, offering new paradigms relevant for our day and age. Joshua, can you take a few moments to fill in those gaps and also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Yeah, well, just to keep it simple, so I'm actually based in or actually, I grew up in America, but I'm actually living here in the Philippines with my wife here in Manila. There's just a lot that I could share of how I got to where I'm at now. But yeah, I'm pretty much an author and a speaker. And yeah, so I just like to share my journey with people online.
Great. So why don't we get started by having you share with us today one of the biggest fears that you've had to face?
Yeah, so I guess this is something that I don't usually talk about too often, but people, a good number of people know this about me. So just to give your listeners a little bit of my background, I don't even know if you were aware of this, but I was actually born with an underdeveloped right hand, like a deformity. Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty much one of my biggest struggles that I had my whole life. And so growing up, just like a lot of kids, I was teased by a lot of other kids, because sometimes they can be pretty cruel. And unfortunately, even some adults can be cruel as well. And I wish I could say that I never let their words or even like the disgusted looks on people's faces when they would look at my hand, whether they knew it or not. That's just how I looked at it. I let it get to me, unfortunately. And so growing up, I felt really like ugly, to be honest, and I felt very different from other people in this way, and very insecure about my hand. And so growing up, I was always wondering, will girls ever like me? What kind of job will I have in the future? Will I have to deal with these uncomfortable stares the rest of my life? And so basically the fear that I had was, was basically just showing my hand in public, to be honest. And so I've been public speaking, Billy, since I was 17 years old. And so no matter how strange it sounds, even as a public speaker, I used to keep my hand in my pocket all the time, which could look kind of awkward and uncomfortable. But I did that for several years because I was that afraid. Because I felt like if I showed my hand, if I just took my hands out of my pocket when I'm in front of an audience, it felt like the whole world was looking at me. It just felt like they were all staring at it as though I was like some sort of freak show. I know that's not the case, but that's just how I felt, I guess, because a lot of the bad experiences that I had when I was growing up. And so in 2005, this is just give more context. I actually ended up having like the worst year of my life back in 2005, both physically and emotionally, because I know there's a lot that I could share about this, but I was experiencing excruciating pain from a back injury that I had. That I got from breakdancing. So I'm what you call back in the day a b-boy. I used to breakdance since I was a little kid. Despite my hand being the way that it was, I could still do that. And so I injured myself, suffering from something called a herniated disc. And at that same time, around that same time, I was also diagnosed with a chronic digestive disease called GERDS, which is gastroesophageal reflux disease. And so I was struggling with those two big things in my life during that time. But then in 2006, I had this radical, what you can call like a paradigm shift, where I started to revisit the subject of physical healing. Because as a kid, I used to actually want to be healed when I was a little kid. I used to like pray to God as a little kid and, asking Him to give me two hands when I would wake up. Hopefully, I was wishing I'd have two hands and stuff. And so I'd be praying for miracles, so to speak, going to healing crusades, and then nothing would happen. And so I became, because of my, what you would call negative experiences, I became a hardcore skeptic of miracles, what people would call miracles or healing, for 8 years. And I was a very, like I said, hardcore critic. And but that's a whole other story. But anyways, I started revisiting, like I said, the subject of healing back in 2006, and I eventually started to, what we would call, pray for the sick or practice healing on the sick. And for the first time, surprisingly, I started seeing results, and which later on led to my own healing, which is, of course, a big story in and of itself as well. But even though I started to believe in the idea that anything is possible, as I started to pray for the sick back in 2006, there was still that one thing that I felt was impossible for me, which was this limitation that I had, so to speak, this one that I actually created myself, where I couldn't believe in overcoming the fear of showing my hand in public. So here I was speaking at different events, conferences about miracles, and using these terms called the supernatural and all, et cetera, et cetera. And yet here I was feeling that all things are possible except for this one issue for me that I had. I just couldn't believe in myself of overcoming this fear of, just because I felt so self-conscious. So there was like this, what you would call like a cognitive dissonance going on with me, But as I was still going around speaking at a lot of places, on the idea of belief, or the believing for the impossible, there was one day that literally changed my life forever. And it was a day that I finally faced my fear. And so, like I said, I was speaking at a lot of places concerning healing and, miracles. And so I was invited to speak at my university at the time. This was back in 2006. And so, just as I usually do before any speaking engagement, I usually, meditate, where I get focused, and what we would call prayer for some people. And so I would do that. It was no big deal, But before I started to walk to the auditorium where I was going to speak this one day, I just thought I'll do what I always do. I'll keep my right hand in my pocket the entire time, as I speak, just like as I did the week before at a conference where I spoke about miracles. I had my hand in my pocket the whole time, so I thought, what's going to be new at this event when I'm speaking at my university? It's just no big deal. So why would I want to put myself in a situation where I'm going to have to deal with one of my biggest fears that day? And so shortly after, this is the strange part. Shortly after I entered the building, the auditorium where I was going to speak, I kid you not, I don't know how to explain it, but something out of the ordinary happened to me this day. And I heard like this very distinct voice, but it wasn't like just any voice. It was like very gentle, yet it was very firm, and it didn't sound like me. It didn't sound like the usual voice in my head, especially because of what I heard it say. But the only way that I could describe it was like it was just this, like this internal audible voice, kind of like interrupting my thoughts, and call it God, universe, higher self, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. All I know is that this voice was very crystal clear when I heard it, and his voice said, "You are going to show your hand today." That's it. That's all that I heard. It literally interrupted my thoughts, and I freaked out, And here's this audience. They were waiting for me to speak at the auditorium, and I was like pacing back and forth because I was panicking. And I know this is not a big deal for a lot of people, but if you just know more of my story, Billy, like this was the biggest issue that I've struggled with my whole life. So it was a big issue for me. And long story short, once I got up to the front to speak, I was very uncomfortable, and I just burst into tears in front of everybody in the audience. And they had no idea what was going on with me, because I just knew that it was a day that I was finally going to face my fear of showing my hand to everyone, in the audience. And I felt, like I said, I felt extremely uncomfortable. And the audience, they were probably wondering what the heck was going on and what was it that I was hesitating to do or say. But there I was, just standing there, vulnerable, crying, kind of like a baby. And I'm an adult, I'm in my mid 20s, and all eyes were on me. and I tried to remove my hand out of my pocket several times, but I just felt like I couldn't. And then all of a sudden, I started to get overwhelmed with like a lot of the painful childhood memories that I would have, of just the disgusted looks on people's faces, where the fear kind of deepened even more as I was standing in front of everybody. And then a close friend of mine at the time, he got up from his seat and he moved to the center of the aisle. And then he looked directly at me and he gave me this really intense look on his, with his eyes. And he gave me that like that slight nod with his head, sort of like the the nod that Mr. Miyagi gave Daniel in The Karate Kid. I don't know if you saw that movie, right?
Yeah,
But then
totally.
he gave me that look, and then he was just giving me that affirmation, like, Josh, you can do it. Because he was one of my closest friends at the time, so he knew what I was about to do because he saw so much fear in me. Even though I didn't say anything to him beforehand. And then, while all eyes were fixed, and then while my eyes were fixed to the ground, because I was so scared to look up at people's reactions, it finally happened. And I took my right hand out of my pocket, and for the first time in my life, Billy, I just held it up high for everyone to see. And my eyes were still fixed to the ground because I was so scared to look up. And then, with my hand still up in the air, I finally found the courage to look up and around at the crowd. And what I saw was something that I'll never forget, even to this day. And I saw people's eyes and they were staring, but to my surprise, they weren't looking at my hand, at least from what I can tell. And instead, I just saw them looking straight into my eyes. And ultimately, I just felt they were looking straight into my heart. And, honestly, Billy, that there's so much I could say about that day, but that day literally changed my life forever. And ever since that day, 2006, I've been speaking with my hands out of my pocket and, helping people deal with, their own issues with self-love and helping people overcome their fears. And so, yeah, that's just one of the biggest fears that I've dealt with in my life that I've had to overcome. And there's many fears that I had, but I know that's a big one. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And
sure.
I would imagine, I mean, just listening to your story, that it was clearly a life changing moment. And I would imagine you just approach everything differently now, having faced that.
Yeah, I mean, it just gives me more of the confidence. I get reminded constantly of that day that in order to face your fears, in order to overcome them, you just have to face it one day. Because like I said, I've been doing public speaking since I was 17. I'm 36 years old now. In 2006, I was already in my mid 20s. So imagine all these years, I got so used to, I'll just do another week speaking with my hands in my pocket, no big deal. But I know that the fear that I would kind of like put aside all the time was eventually gonna surface again one day. And that was the day that was completely unexpected. That's when I heard that voice, whoever that was. And like I said, it did change my life forever. I just spoke in Singapore last week, and I was showing my hand to people in Singapore, and as I spoke, and people came up to me, sharing to me their own issues with their physical body, and that's what I've seen. Just it doesn't just change my life. I've seen on how much it changed other people's lives. When they could see me vulnerable, this grown guy just weeping because I was really afraid that day. It was very unexpected for me that if I didn't face that fear, I don't know where I would be today. And if I, the fact that I'm able to help so many people deal with their perception of themselves and be able to accept themselves and at the same time look at how their weaknesses can become their strengths as well. So yeah, it's helped me approach a lot of things differently in my life. So I'm just very grateful.
Joshua, are you ready for the speed run?
Sure, let's do it.
What individual, whether they're fiction or real, has made the most impact on your life?
Individual, honestly, I can't think of any particular individual. But if I could mention, the people that come to my mind, it's my family, to be honest. I even just got off the phone with my mom just like 2 hours ago, and she's in America. But if I could just mention my family, because once your audience becomes more familiar with my work, they will see the kind of content that I kind of talk about, which could sometimes be kind of controversial. And so because of that, I've lost a good number of friends and connections and opportunities, etc., because of the things that I talk about online, the things I write about in my book. But my family, it's amazing. Just all these years, even though we see things differently, they've shown me nothing but unconditional love through it all. And I guess that's what just love does. It's kind of like it doesn't matter in a way, what my son believes, what my parents might be thinking, because I love my son, or my sisters, the way they still treat me the same, even though we see things so differently. And so honestly, I can't think of any particular individual, but one thing that I'm always constantly grateful for is my family. Like, I just love them so much. I mean, they're so scared. Sometimes I think read the stuff that people say about me online because of the stuff that I talk about. It's very hot topic kind of issues that just some people, unless you're on the same page, it's going to be very difficult to swallow. So, like I said, it's just my family have been the people in my life that just shown me so much love and support that yeah, they're just the ones that really stand out to me at this time of my life. And of course my wife too, who's here. And she stuck with me from the very beginning, ever since we met. And she would always tell me, Josh, these other people who could criticize you for the stuff that you share online, she's like, they don't know you, but I know you. I know your heart. So it's those people in my life who've been able to look past, these kind of hot topic issues, and who've been able to see into my heart and been able to follow my journey. So,
If you could instantly change one thing in the world, what would you change?
huh. Um, I mean, I guess what comes to mind, because I even experienced this earlier today. I live in the Philippines, and I live in an area that it's very interesting here in the Philippines, because you'll see two extremes. You'll see the rich and the poor actually living like side by side next to each other. Like, you'll see a big, rich area, but you'll see homeless people like right outside. So it's very interesting. I don't really see this in other countries, especially in America. And so one of the things that I see here that my heart always gets moved to, is like when I see people here struggling financially here in the Philippines, and people working really hard and not being compensated for, the hard work that they do. And so I guess one of the things that I would like to see change is for people to have their needs met. Just seeing some people even outside my home, to be honest, like you'll see people even outside of our a condo here, people begging for food, and people holding babies and stuff like that, and just begging. And honestly, it breaks my heart. And so I can't deny that at the same time, struggle makes us stronger. You know what I mean? Because if without the challenges in life, we wouldn't be strong people where we are today. But I can't deny the fact that it also breaks my heart when I see a lot of people struggling financially without, having the food and the clothes. When I see people sleeping here, even outside of my house, sometimes on the ground. I just wish I can do more. So, we do what we can do. I just wish we would be more givers to people. So that's just the first thing that comes to my mind.
What's your biggest weakness?
My biggest weakness, just to be honest, I still have moments where I feel self-conscious about my hand at times, even after all these years. It's been over 10 years, and I still have my moments where I still feel self-conscious about it. So, just to be honest,
What's your biggest strength?
my biggest strength is that I overcome my fear every single day of being self-conscious. So, even though I still, like I said, the stairs, I still get the stairs. It could still get to me a little bit. Thankfully, I'm still able to overcome my fear every single day. So I guess that's a strength, I guess.
If you could only have one book to read, what's that book going to be?
That's a tough one. I'll honestly say I don't. I read a lot of books, and that's just the one I just can't answer. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. So I might have to skip that one.
Do you have a favorite sound?
Sound, laughter, because I obviously you could even tell I laugh a lot. My wife and I, we love to laugh a lot, tell jokes, and watch funny movies. So I love, especially here, right? Like as I was even mentioning, there I see a lot of people here who don't have much, but they're still able to laugh. And when I see people laugh, even though they don't have much, it just makes me happy because they're able to recognize that there's more to life than a lot of material things. And so I just love seeing people laugh. Yeah. Or hearing people laugh.
And Joshua, if someone would like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way would be through my website, which is joshuatongol.com, or obviously Facebook. So I'm on Facebook. Just search up my name. My last name is spelled Tongol. And I have a podcast, Twitter handle. It's just my name, pretty much. Instagram. So it's just pretty much my name. And on all the social media platforms, I'm pretty much on the majority of them. So just type in my name and you should find me.
And Joshua, what parting advice would you like to leave with us today?
Advice, just yeah, just based on this whole interview, face your fears. Just one of the things that I got a lot out of me facing my fear is that it could inspire a lot of people out there. Because like I was saying earlier, like when I became real and vulnerable with other people, when I faced my fear that day, I saw people become real and vulnerable with me. Literally that day in 2006, I had all these people come up to me and start crying, and they were showing me their scars on their legs from being burned, and other people, even another guy even had like a deformity on his hand and all these things. And so face your fears because you can inspire a lot of people, and when people see you do it, they'll be inspired to do the same.
That's excellent advice, Joshua, and thank you so much for that. I want to thank you too, Joshua, for coming on the show, not only just because you shared your story, which was amazing, but you are an inspiration. And so I really do thank you for the time that you've given us today and showing us of a life that we can have if we just face our fear.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Billy. I really appreciate it. This is a really good topic that I think people should address. So yeah, appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.